Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible right here on Fulfill Radio. And with me is Dr. Don Preston. We are delighted to be with you today. Looking forward to another great study. And also to hear a little bit about what's going on in each of our worlds. So last time I went first, so I'm going to turn it over to Don, let him speak first, and then maybe I'll tell you just a little bit about what's happening on our end. What's up, Don? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing absolutely great. Really doing well. I'm super busy, obviously, just like you. It's been a very fruitful last several days. Since a week ago, numerous emails from individuals from literally all over the world. I'm hearing from an increasing number of people from foreign countries. I keep hearing from these individuals that, like we have reported here on this program. Well, now this week it's my phone going off here in the background. So let me mute that thing. I didn't even realize I had my sound turned back on. I normally turn my sound off when I film of a morning, and I've been doing some extra filming, and then I forget to turn it back on. So at some point I turned it back on. But anyway, I'm hearing from an increasing number of people who just, they just say how their lives are being transformed. And I think it's the wide variety of the countries that I'm hearing from, as well as you, that is so encouraging. I know you and I were talking on the phone, I guess it was yesterday, that there seems to be kind of a definite upswing. There seems to be a surge of interest in covenant eschatology right now. And as I just indicated, it's literally coming from all around the world, every imaginable country. And so, as I said here, I don't have a given specific email in mind. None of them just stood out to me, but I've received numerous emails over the last week, since last Tuesday, from different people around the world, expressing their profound appreciation for our ministries, both of our ministries, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's very, very good. I agree with you. There seems to be definitely an upsurge in the interest that's going on. I think I shared with you that the people from Jakarta, Indonesia, invited me to come back and speak. And they wanted this time, the first time it was at 7 o'clock in the morning, which was, kind of early for me to be speaking. but that was 7 p.m. their time. So this time they decided they wanted to be in the morning, but in the mid-morning. So it was 10 p.m. that night. And I do work, pretty hard all day long. So you can imagine right. I was a little tired when I started. But we did a presentation that was about an hour, 20 minutes long or so. And then after that, they went into Q&A, which I thought was going to just last until 3 p.m. because that's what they had on the schedule. Well, that didn't work. It was. It turned out to be a 5-hour endeavor, and they continue to ask questions. We're very interested, and of course, excuse me, I worked with a different worked with a different interpreter this time, and but she did a very good job. It was a lady this time, and she did a very good job. We managed to get through it, pretty much with no problem. I need to get out of Facebook here, so the noise in my background will not keep going on. I was going to post the link there, but at any rate, it was a very good, presentation and study. Several of them asking just, tons of questions, one after the other, and then, after, I guess about 4 hours had passed, or maybe by the time we got close to the close, someone suggested, well, the actual coordinator of the presentation said, hey, what do you think about having an international conference? It's about time for us to do something international. So I was just kind of taken aback by that because, I hadn't thought about it. It's enough for us to try to schedule just a local one in our city, let alone a national one. And now you're talking about an international conference. But what does that say about the interest that people are having and that they see as the vision for, future studies and gatherings of people around this view? They also told me that, it's not uncommon for preachers in their country to have 1,000 people in the audience. And the first time that I spoke, they said, many people, they had shared it with many people. So I take it that they would do the same thing with this one. I have no idea how many people have watched that, but it's been quite, if it's like the other one, then it would be quite a few. And for them to be talking about the possibility of an international conference just sounds good on the surface of it. Whether or not it will ever happen, the idea that people are thinking in those terms is really, really wonderful. So I'm
absolutely,
and they did ask, when was I coming back? So I think they're planning another one at some point in time. And if it happens, it'll just happen, and I'll just keep doing them as long as they want to hear. On another note, we did a presentation I've been doing a series of studies on 1 John 3, 1 through 4, on the sons of God, etc. And naturally, to talk about the sons of God means that I also have to talk about Christ being the Son of God and about his new birth, etc., from the dead. Well, that raised quite a bit of interest as well, and may have morphed into a debate between William Vincent and myself, of which you know him quite well, as we do on Facebook. And I've been in discussions all day along with that, and I've noticed that since we've had over 200 comments on the page, on my page, just with, since Sunday, from that broadcast, and there have been over 1,900 views. So it's, early in the week, and the views are still climbing. And I'm sure that if we were to announce, as we are at least in discussion at this point, and I see that he sent me a message, I'll see what he says. Okay, so he's going to send me an email. I told him to contact me on email because I couldn't keep digging through all of those comments trying to find, what he was saying about the debate. So there's a possibility that we will be having a live radio debate in 2 weeks, and with you as the moderator, as you have agreed. And we felt like that would be good for the people in the local area because they haven't heard any debate for the most part. And I thought it would be good to do that on the broadcast because I know some of them are, in fact, listening. And even though it would be, somewhat of a short debate, but I'm going to discuss with him that after we do that one, we may do a second one that would be a little bit more lengthy on the same topic on Two Guys in the Bible. That would give us much time, which is, what you and I have discussed today. And so that is a possibility as well. But the subject would be the image of Christ, because we've been talking about, as I said, Christ being the firstborn from the dead and what image he has and what is the image of God. And of course, Vincent is saying that it's the physical body. And, it's hard for me to even just fathom that someone saying that. But nevertheless, that's the position he's taken. So I'm trying to get him to sign his name to a proposition for that. And I think it'll be quite an interesting discussion for the little time that it will take, unless we do a second one, which, that would be fine with me if he chooses to do so. So that's where things are. And I do have a couple of pending obligations to meet with some people via Zoom. One, a young man, I think from Las Vegas. His wife has already joined us on our Wednesday night Bible study, and he's interested in joining as well. And so I've got to get back with him almost immediately between now and maybe tomorrow, send him a note and just let him know he wants to spend a few minutes talking. So, again, people are still showing their interest and growing. I have people writing me, asking me why I haven't posted videos to YouTube. I do have videos to post. I just haven't found the time to put them up there. Maybe I'm a little bit lazy. This stuff is getting harder as I get older. And that's the reason that they're not there. So, and then, a couple of days I haven't felt very good. As a matter of fact, I was sick a little bit earlier today, but Leora came and nursed me with some type of baking soda mix and then some ginger tea, et cetera, that made me feel a lot better. So I'm doing much better at this time. But those are the kinds of things that are happening, and we're excited about it. Oh, and we've had a very good discussion with a gentleman that has been following us off and on Facebook. Occasionally he comes on. He has a lot of objections, et cetera. But we moved the needle quite a bit with him today through a series of back and forth exchanges. And I think his last comment to me was, I now see how all things have been fulfilled, but the one problem I'm having is the resurrection. So I wrote him back and told him, I said, yeah, that's usually the last domino. So don't feel bad. Yeah. Just let's keep stepping. And but his attitude has been very, very good. And I've had some help, so don't want to say that it was all through me. There's been a couple of people on there that have been just absolutely extremely helpful in interpreting some of his questions that I missed and responding to them. And so we've been working in tandem with each other, doing a great job of coordinating our efforts. And I want to give thanks to them. I think one guy's name is Vic Valentino. If I pronounced it correct. If I didn't, please forgive me. But I think that's one. And, of course, Solomon Bido has pitched in, and Mike Dooley, a few other guys that we know very well. And so we appreciate them and the efforts that they make as well. And it just shows you how teamwork makes the dream work. So that's kind of what's going on in my world.
Well, all of the names that you mentioned are very, very sharp people, that's for sure. Vic Valentino is most assuredly a sharp guy. Mike Dooley is. Solomon is. You had some really, really sharp minds at work there in that contribution. Since you reported some of that stuff, and you mentioned Zoom, I mentioned last week that I was due to have my very first ever Zoom Bible study, and I was bragging to you yesterday on the phone about how I got my technology all set up, all working, all by myself. And I am so proud of me.
Wow. I'm impressed.
I know. I didn't have to call William Bell and say, what in the world do I do? I did have to switch. I even had to switch mics, and I discovered how to do it on my own and got it working. And, the guys were on the video there, but I couldn't get the microphone to work. And they just simply couldn't hear me. So I did this and I did that. And lo and behold, next thing you know, everything was working, the audio, the video, and there we go. But it was a group of about 5 guys. And it was just, these guys were from literally everywhere. One was from Los Angeles, for instance, if I remember correctly. One guy was from Winslow, Arkansas, which is just south of Fayetteville, my old, stomping grounds. But we had a really, really good study. It was 2 hours long. And I just laid down the premise that biblical eschatology is not historical eschatology It is about the end of Israel's covenant age. And I know, and you know very well, how that is a daunting concept for many people. I'm reading a book currently entitled AD 70 and the End of the World by a guy by the name of Paul Ellis. Now, the book is a very well-written book. He's an excellent writer. But he just finds the idea of AD 70 being the end of the Old Covenant age, he just finds that off the scale of crazy. And of course, that tints and flavors everything that he says in the book. But nonetheless, I was very thrilled with the Zoom study, and those guys want to have another study very soon, and we will certainly be doing that. One of them commented, he didn't say anything else during the entirety of the study, but right down toward the close, he raised his hand and he said, well, I would just like to say that although I've got an awful lot of questions, what you have presented sounds more positive, and he said, I'll use the term, sounds more hopeful than any view of eschatology that I've ever heard in my life. He said, it really, really sounds good and positive. And I said, well, that's because it is. It's not a doctrine of fear. It's not a doctrine that we have to dread the future. It is living in the reality of the presence of God. And so that I was very pleased with that. Didn't have near as many on there as you did in your study with the Jakarta group. But hey, it's my very first time. And so they've already said that there will be a lot more guys in the next study. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And also, you mentioned a debate. I've been contacted over the last several days about a fella. He's actually an agnostic, but he is in touch with a large number of scholars, and I'm talking very prominent. And he contacted me and wanted to know if I would be willing to be involved with a formal, I'm assuming it would be Zoom or YouTube or something like that, but a video debate with a skeptic. And I said, well, if it's a debate on philosophy, I'm not a philosopher. I said, I've certainly done a lot of reading in the area, but I'm not a philosopher. But I said, now, if you want to get a skeptic who wants to argue whether or not Jesus is a failed prophet because of his predictions of his coming, then I said, I'll be more than happy to do that. And he said, well, I've got a guy in mind. He believes that the New Testament books were written after AD 70. He even doubts the historicity of the story of Jesus himself, and said he certainly believes that Jesus' prediction of his coming failed. And I said, well, that's the type of guy I would be more than willing to debate. Now, this fellow's name that has been set forth as a possible debate opponent is Dr. Richard Carrier. He's actually written several books and is a professor and very well known in certain circles. And so this will be my very first. If it takes place, and I told the guy who contacted me, I said, well, I'll put it to you like this. I said, I would not want to debate the man until and unless I had read some of his books so that I know exactly where he's coming from. I want to know what evidence he's setting forth to try to prove his case for the non-historical Jesus, for the late dating of the book of books of the New Testament. And I said, now, I know an awful lot of the arguments that have been set forth by the skeptics down through the centuries, but who knows whether or not this guy has some, quote, new information that he thinks is really, really powerful. This man is a historian, so he is supposedly coming at his position from the perspective of a historian. So I know this would be quite a daunting challenge, but I welcome that challenge, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing if this gentleman can arrange this. He's already mentioned to this professor, he's already mentioned the possibility of debating me, but the professor's already said that he's working on one major project interestingly enough, this professor is going to tackle and write against the Israel-only doctrine because he's been introduced to it, and he thinks it's one of the craziest things he's ever heard in his life, to be honest about it. But nonetheless, he's working on a project to write about it, and but nonetheless, he was approached about debating me, and has expressed some passing interest in doing that. So when the guy got back to me and said, "Hey, I think this is definitely a possibility," I said, "Well, okay, that's fine, but I probably won't be able to do anything for at least 3 months. I've got to have at least 3 months, because of everything else that's going on in my world, as well as wanting some time to prepare and to get to know that guy and his writings." And so the guy told me, he said, "Well, if it's all the same to you, I would much prefer that the two of you have more of just a discussion, not a formal debate, but just a discussion between two scholars." Those are his words, not mine. I said, "I'm perfectly open to that." I said, "However, it's got to be done." And I said, "Whether you moderate or somebody else moderates, it's got to be done in such a way that not one person, and that includes me, not one person in this conversation, hogs all the time, dominates the time. We've each got to have the same amount of time to present our case, to respond to the other fella." And he said, "Oh, yeah. He said, "That's a given." And he said, "One man's not going to be able to dominate it." He said, "That won't be allowed." So I'm very excited about this prospect. As I mentioned, I've never actually debated a skeptic before. Now, as you and I both know, it doesn't matter if a man's a Christian or if a man's a skeptic. In either camp, when each camp says, "Well, yeah, we know Jesus made the prediction that his coming was imminent in the first century, but of course he didn't come," it doesn't matter if you're skeptic, atheist, or believer, then you're wrong. And so, that's one of those situations where, to quote a line from a John Fogerty song, "Put me in, coach. I'm ready. I'm ready to play." So we'll see how this plays out. We'll see if this professor is actually willing to enter into this dialogue, and of course, we'll be making the announcements should he express a willingness and an interest and a commitment to doing something like this. So it's exciting.
Yes, it is. And I want to just point out one of the things that you said, and that is before you enter into a debate with this guy, you want to take some time to study what his views are all about. And that's very, very important. A lot of people think you just jump up and debate just because they ask you to. But if you're not familiar with what their views are on it, you would serve yourself well to study them, study where they're coming from. And you may find out with some of the things that they're saying, you may even agree with some of them, or you may find some nuances that are the reasons why you don't, that could help you in your preparation. So that's very, very important to do. And because of this subject that I'm talking about, and the fact that we're currently studying it, I feel prepared enough to at least have a short discussion on it. Now, if we decide to do a longer one, we may put that off a little bit further in the future to, study from even what we do at first. But the idea is, and I'm even now, gathering information for the discussion, whether it comes off or not. But that's very, very important to be able to understand the other person's view so that, one, you don't misrepresent them, two, you better understand them, and you don't just go in, blindly, thinking that just because you believe your view and you know what your view is, that you're going to understand where the other person is coming from so that you can represent, both arguments on both sides, very well, whether you're in the affirmative or the negative. So that's very, very important. And I think people should just realize that when they up and say, okay, let me go debate. I don't care who it is. You at least want to study their view and study it as best as you possibly can.
Well, amen to that. And, of course, you're familiar with my methodology, and you're very familiar with the fact that all the way down through the years, all the years that you and I have known each other, you know that I have always said, before I debate anyone, I want to understand what they believe about the subject as well as they understand what they believe. Number one, I never want to misrepresent anyone. And that's one of the reasons why it's so amusing. You know, over the last several days, as you're aware, I've posted some articles in response to Ed Stevens' view about the Adamic death and about forgiveness and what have you. And his only response is, Don Preston has grossly and blatantly misrepresented my views. And yet he didn't document how I had misrepresented his views. And I even cataloged the very items, the very subjects, the very tenets and elements that I had discussed. And I said, I did not misrepresent you on this, did I? And he didn't answer a single one. And so, you know, it's one of those type of things that I absolutely do not want to misrepresent anyone, because that reflects badly on me. To misrepresent anyone in a discussion, whether it's formal or informal, reflects badly on the person making that misrepresentation. So I don't want to do that. I consider that dishonest. Now, a person can sometimes, and I've done this, can sometimes inadvertently, ignorantly misrepresent what a person actually believes. When I'm corrected, I don't have a problem in the world saying, I'm sorry. Here's why I believed that you did believe what I represented. But since you now disavow that, then I'll accept that disavowal. And I will accept what you say as your true position. So, again, my desire, anytime I'm going to debate somebody, I want to know what they believe, and I want to know why. I want to know their evidence. I want to know their arguments against what I do believe. And I want to know every bit of the evidence that they have adduced either for their position or against mine. It's why I'm reading this book by Paul Ellis, 8070 and the End of the World, because I'm going to begin a review of that book on my Friday videos. I was going to begin it this Friday. I don't know that I'm going to be able to begin that. I've got some really, really pressing business that I've got to take care of that's taking up my early mornings. But nonetheless, I'm reading that book so that I can accurately get in a video and say, Paul Ellis says and believes the following. Here's what I believe to be the error in that position. So anyway, back to the issue. You know, I'm very excited about it. I hope and I pray. In fact, I'm probably going to be purchasing some of Mr. Carrier's books over the next few days just to have them on hand. You know, it's always good to know what the skeptical world is saying. Whether or not you engage in dialogue and debate with the actual authors or not is not the point, but to know what they're saying, to be up to date on the, quote, latest arguments, unquote, against Christianity is always a good thing. And so, like I said, I'll probably be purchasing some of his books in the very, very near future, probably over the next couple of days. So anyway, you know, William, we need to get back to our study of the Messianic Temple. And we've kind of been joking around about Ezekiel 40 through 47, which is the ground and basis for this incredible discussion of what is known as the Millennial Temple, the Messianic Temple, by our dispensational world or friends. Now, I want to reiterate something that I closed out the program with last week, because I had a couple of people contact me and say, hey, Don, you were making a great point there at the close of the program, a great point by N.T. Wright, but the program ended and you got cut off, and so we didn't get to hear your complete point. Here's the point that I was making. The Pharisees of the first century believed in the restoration of Israel. They believed in the restoration, the purification, restoration of the temple at Jerusalem in the kingdom at the coming of the Messiah. And as I've pointed out repeatedly, we are constantly told, well, look, the Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Paul said he was a Pharisee. Therefore, Paul believed in physical resurrection. Well, when people make that argument, it must be kept in mind. Absolutely must be kept in mind that the Pharisees' doctrine of the physical resurrection was absolutely interwoven with, inseparable from, inextricably bound up with their doctrine of the restoration of Israel, which to them meant the restoration of the all literal, physical 12 tribes to the literal land. And as just noted, they believed in the purification, the restoration of the literal physical temple, and sacrifices, literal physical bloody animal sacrifices by a physically restored Levitical and Zadokite priesthood, and the imposition of circumcision on all faithful Israelites. Keep that in mind, folks. Now, since their doctrine of the physical resurrection was bound up with their doctrine of the physical temple, then if you're going to say, hey, the Pharisees believed in physical resurrection, Paul said he believed like the Pharisees, or said he was a Pharisee, therefore Paul believed in physical resurrection, then why do you not, if you don't, why do you not also likewise believe in a physical restored temple in Jerusalem? And yet, when you talk to futurists, such as the amillennialist and the postmillennialist, and you ask them, do you believe in a yet future physical restored temple with physical animal sacrifices being offered by a Zadokite/Levitical priesthood, then they recoil in horror and say, absolutely not. That's not biblical. Kenneth Gentry, a postmillennialist, does not believe in a restored physical temple, physical priesthood, physical sacrifices, but he believes in a physical resurrection. Why? Oh, because Paul said he was a Pharisee. I'm sorry, folks. You cannot divorce the doctrine of a physical temple, physical priesthood, physical sacrifices from the doctrine of physical resurrection. There is no dichotomy between those in the Pharisaic hope. Now, I was sharing last week of how some scholars realize that Jesus rejected the Pharisaic, nationalistic, militaristic, theocratic, eschatological hope. I read from N.T. Wright's book, Jesus and the Victory of God, page 390, in which he said, quote, I therefore propose that the clash between Jesus and his contemporaries, especially the Pharisees. Now, boy, I just really hope everyone will grasp the power of what N.T. Wright says. Oh, but how inconsistent N.T. Wright is, how N.T. Wright contradicts himself, as we shall see here momentarily. So, to begin again, I therefore propose that the clash between Jesus and his contemporaries, especially the Pharisees, must be seen in terms of alternative political agendas. Now, catch this, folks. Generated by alternative eschatological beliefs and expectations. Jesus was announcing the kingdom in a way that did not reinforce, but rather called into question the agenda of revolutionary zeal which dominated the horizon of, especially, the dominant group within Pharisaism, unquote. So according to N.T. Wright, Jesus rejected the political, theological, and eschatological agenda of the Pharisees. His kingdom doctrine was an alternative, an alternate doctrine concerning the kingdom that radically rejected the Pharisaic doctrine of the kingdom. Oh, but wait, folks. The Pharisaic doctrine of the kingdom was their doctrine of the resurrection. Listen to me. There is no difference between the nature of the kingdom and the nature of the resurrection. Evidently, that hasn't soaked in to N.T. Wright. Why do I say that? Because N.T. Wright believes, pardon me, that Jesus taught physical resurrection. So on the one hand, N.T. Wright says Jesus rejected the eschatological narrative of the Pharisees. Jesus rejected the kingdom doctrine of the Pharisees. Oh, but wait, Jesus taught the Pharisaic doctrine of physical resurrection. That is one of the most self-contradictory, illogical concepts that could possibly be imagined. You simply cannot deny and reject the idea of a physical kingdom, a physical temple, the restoration of a temple cultus, and at the same time affirm a physical resurrection. And that means that when people go to Ezekiel 40 to 47, and they want to talk about this physical kingdom, then you have to be able to ask yourself the following question. Why did Jesus reject the offer of a physical kingdom when it was offered to him by the Jews? When Jesus perceived that they, that is the crowd, the multitude, was about to come and to make him king, he withdrew himself. Now, I have posed this question, by the way, folks, in my brand spanking new book, Paul on Trial, Paul, the Pharisees, and the Resurrection. I pose the following question, or questions. Did Jesus come to establish the kingdom? Well, he said, I'm the king, John 18, 34 through 37. Pardon me. When Pilate said, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said, I am, and for this reason did I come into this world. But he also said, my kingdom is not of this world, or else my servants would fight. So, Jesus came into this world to be king. He came to establish the kingdom. The Pharisees and the Jews wanted a king. They wanted the kingdom. They offered Jesus the kingdom. But Jesus rejected their offer. It was when Jesus rejected the Jewish offer of the nationalistic, militaristic, theocratic kingdom that the Jews then turned on Jesus and wanted him dead. So here's the question. If Jesus was offering to be the kind of king that the Jews wanted, why didn't he accept the offer when they were about to come and make him king? If Jesus was going to establish the kind of kingdom that the Pharisees wanted, why did he reject their offer of that very kind of kingdom? And if the Pharisees wanted the kind of kingdom and kingship that Jesus came to establish, why did they reject him, turn on him, and want him dead? If each party was offering what the other wanted, why did each party reject the other? Folks, it makes no sense whatsoever. Well, let's turn now to Paul. And again, I develop all of this in this brand new book, Paul on Trial. In Acts chapter 23, Paul was on trial in front of the Sanhedrin. And when he perceived that part were Sadducees and part were Pharisees, he said, "Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee. For the hope of the promise of the resurrection, am I on trial?" Well, the Pharisees immediately responded, and to paraphrase, said, "Hey, look, Paul's a mighty fine guy. We find no fault in this man." And there was a great dissension among the Sanhedrin because of that debate. Hey, Paul said he was a Pharisee. Okay. So once again, the argument is made. The Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Paul said he was a Pharisee. Therefore, Paul must have believed in physical resurrection. Well, wait a minute. Approximately 14 days, no more than that, but approximately 14 days after the Pharisees had declared what a fine guy Paul was, because he was a Pharisee, because he said he was a Pharisee, because he claimed to believe in the resurrection. Approximately 14 days later, Paul is standing before Felix, and he says, "And now this I confess to you, that after the way which they who? The Pharisees, call a sect, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things that are written in the law and the prophets. I have hope in God." Now watch this, "which they themselves also accept." So who's he talking about? Well, it's obviously the Pharisees, because the Sadducees don't believe what he's about to say. "But this I confess to you, that after the way which they call the sect, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things that are written in the law and the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there is to be," literally about to be, "the resurrection of the just and of the unjust." Folks, you've got to catch the power of that. Here is Paul in front of Felix. The Pharisees are there. Approximately 2 weeks previously, Paul had said, "I'm a Pharisee," and the Pharisee said, "This is a mighty fine guy." But in that ensuing, intervening 2-week period of time, the Pharisees learned something about Paul and his doctrine of the resurrection that they did not know. And now they are gathered around. They're gathered around Paul. They're gathered around Felix, and they want Paul dead. Why do they want him dead? For his doctrine of the resurrection. Okay, folks, here's the question. Just like with Jesus, Jesus came to establish the kingdom. He came to be king. The Jews wanted a king. They wanted a kingdom. Each group offered the other the kingship and the kingdom. But Jesus rejected the Jews' offer of the kingship and the kingdom And then the Jews rejected Jesus and his offer of the kingship and the kingdom. Why? Well, very simply iterated by Jesus himself. My kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom does not come with observation. Oh, but wait, that's precisely the kind of kingdom the Pharisees wanted. They wanted the kingdom to come with observation. They wanted the kingdom to come because they wanted the Messiah to come to destroy the Romans. Well, you couldn't get much more with observation than that. But Jesus rejected that. Well, here's Paul, who taught the same kind of kingdom that Jesus did. Here is Paul, who therefore taught the same kind of resurrection that Jesus did. And the Pharisees, who initially accepted Jesus but then turned on him, have now initially accepted Paul and his doctrine of the resurrection, or his stated belief in the resurrection, but now they turn on him just like they turned on Jesus, and they want to kill Paul just like they succeeded in killing Jesus. I don't believe, folks, that you can affirm and sustain for even one moment, logically, biblically, the idea that Paul believed in physical resurrection, and I believe that his trial before the Sanhedrin, before Felix, before Festus, and before Agrippa, I think that trial proves that statement beyond any shadow of a doubt. Therefore, when we come back to N.T. Wright's statement, I'm going to reword it ever so slightly to drive home the point that I'm trying to make. Now, remember, folks, resurrection and Messianic temple are bound up together in Pharisaic thought, in Jewish thought, in Jewish eschatology. In other words, listen to me very carefully. No matter what you may think of Ezekiel 40 to 47, we know what the Pharisees believed about it. Okay? Oh, and as I pointed out last week, we know what the Dead Sea community believed about it. We know what the pseudepigrapha writers believed about it. And all of this is outlined and explained wonderfully in the book that I've mentioned to you by Andrea Robinson, entitled Temple of Presence, in which she documents in one passage after another from the Apocrypha, pseudepigrapha, from the Dead Sea community. They believed that Ezekiel 40 to 47 was to be fulfilled. Many of them did, not all of them. Many of them believed it was spiritual, non-literal. But there was nonetheless a very, very powerful belief in Israel that the temple of Ezekiel 40 to 47 was to be a literal, physical temple, and that's what the Pharisees believed. So with that in mind, okay, temple, kingdom, resurrection, Pharisaic, Jewish mindset of a couple of centuries before the first century, in the first century in the Dead Sea community, in the Pharisees of the first century, that literalistic, materialistic, physical concept of kingdom, temple, resurrection was the dominant view. Well, I should say it was one of the dominant views, but I won't go any further than that. So when N.T. Wright gave the quote that he did, I'm going to edit it slightly. I'm going to change just a few words in it in light of Paul on trial and his doctrine of the resurrection. Quote, I therefore propose that the clash between Paul and his contemporaries, especially the Pharisees, must be seen in terms of alternative political agendas generated by alternative eschatological beliefs and expectations concerning the resurrection. Paul was announcing the kingdom and resurrection in a way which did not reinforce but rather called into question the agenda of revolutionary zeal which dominated the horizon of especially the dominant group within Phariseism. I'm telling you what, folks, my editing, my alteration of N.T. Wright's quote is exactly and precisely on point. It is not it's not a serious negative alteration. It's not taking it out of context, because Jesus and Paul taught the same doctrine concerning the kingdom, concerning the temple, concerning the resurrection. Therefore, Jesus taught a different eschatological agenda from the Pharisees. That means that Paul taught a different eschatological agenda from that of the Pharisees. Since Jesus taught a spiritual kingdom, a spiritual temple, and Paul taught a spiritual kingdom and a spiritual temple, Ephesians 2:19 through 22, then that means that both Jesus and Paul taught a spiritual resurrection, not a nationalistic, not a materialistic, not a physical kingdom / temple / resurrection. Now, to reinforce this, or to reflect on it, once again, when people jump up today and they try to say, and they do say, Paul was a Pharisee. Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. I challenge anyone to show where Paul divorced resurrection from the Pharisaic hope, and where Paul made resurrection physical, but where Paul rejected the nationalistic, materialistic, physical concepts of kingdom, temple, sacrifice, and circumcision. I just fail to see how anyone could be anywhere near successful. And, you know, William, you were talking about William Lane and how you're William Vincent, and your upcoming debate with him. Not long ago on Facebook, William Vincent, Sam Frost, and others made this very argument that I am addressing. The Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Paul said he was a Pharisee. Therefore, Paul believed in physical resurrection. And I just delineated, I made the list of the things that the Pharisees believed in that were materialistic, carnal, physical, all of which were linked to, tied to, wedded to their resurrection hope. William Vincent came back and said, well, Paul rejected all of those physical things, but he accepted the physical resurrection. I immediately challenged him to prove it. I said, show me one scripture where Paul divorces concept of temple, kingdom, sacrifices, circumcision from resurrection. And William literally disappeared. He abandoned that discussion. And a little wonder why. Because once again, folks, I'm sorry, there is no way to properly divorce any of these elements and tenets that I've mentioned tonight: kingdom, temple, sacrifices, circumcision, from resurrection. You can't do it. And by the way, let me make this observation. In the Jewish belief of the first century, it was believed that when a Gentile wanted to become a proselyte, when they wanted to become a proselyte and worship the God of Israel, they had to do two or three things. Number one, they had to be circumcised, physically circumcised. Number two, they had to be baptized. More technically, more literally, they had to baptize themselves. They were not baptized by someone else. They actually baptized themselves. But the Pharisees said that when a Gentile was circumcised, and when the Gentile baptized himself, they became a new creature. They became a new creation. They died to their old life. They were born again to the life of Yahweh. That sounds an awful lot like resurrection language to me, doesn't it, to you, William?
Absolutely. That's precisely what it is.
So the Pharisees even had a concept of spiritual resurrection, because they linked conversion to becoming a new creature, a new creation, and dying and rising to a new life. Paul's discussion of baptism in Romans chapter 6 bears a great deal of resemblance to the language that the Jews used of a convert to Judaism, of dying and being born again. Only Paul is
Dunn, we lost you. I don't know if you're still there. At least I lost you, I should say. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure what happened to Dunn. Let's see if I can find him. Huh. Looks like we're very close to the end of the broadcast, and I can't hear Dunn at all, so I hope I'm not speaking over him. Okay, looks like we did lose Don, so I apologize for that. I'm not sure precisely what happened, but looks like he got disconnected in some way. And we're just about out of time for the broadcast anyway, have only about 30 seconds left. So I'm sure he probably will just let it go and not call back in. We want to thank you for tuning in this evening, and but a great message from Don, as always, and certainly showing the distinction between the belief of the Pharisees and those of Christ and the apostles. It's quite obvious that almost everyone will use that text in Acts 23 to claim that because Paul said he was a Pharisee, that he believed in the same thing the Pharisees did. You can even go check in Josephus and see what their beliefs was, that it was not the same. Look in the Apocrypha, you will see that they had different beliefs regarding the resurrection. And it's very clear that you cannot disassociate the temple and the kingdom from the subject of resurrection. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to say good night to you. We look forward to being back with you on next week. and I'll see if I can find out what happened to Don Preston, but I'm sure it was some type of technical glitch. With that, good night, and God bless. Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Don Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day, and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.